So we can start now, I guess. The funny thing is the panel before us almost capitalized on data privacy. And they went in and started talking about the impacts of data and the data for good. So I was happy to see that they were cut off and they allowed us to pick it up from where we are. I've got, being the last panel today, I think I am the last, eh? The last panel today, I've got some pioneers in the domain of digital. And the respective transformation that comes thereabouts. We've got some security gurus, some telco pioneers as well from the region. And what I would like to really take this discussion and rather than be a Q&A per se as something that none of us would like, is have it more of a fluid session to talk about data privacy, and then the subset of that being data security and data protection, and the various digital services that may evolve that are supposedly to disrupt the new norm and bring a greater good, whereas Ibrahim Jud'on mentioned to take it to data, the good for data. We all know the definition of data privacy, and if you look back on its simplicity, it's really where a citizen or any individual has the power to control any personal information that's collected and used, and has a final say in how that information is used. In today's new norm, that may no longer be the case. And we talked about the evolving of trusted brokers of that data and how we blindly allow those trusted brokers to handle our data and benefit the greater society. But with data privacy comes many challenges and vulnerabilities that we need to be wary about. Vulnerabilities in some of the web services that we develop internally, our poorly trained employees that have to take part in ensuring the privacy of the data that they're entrusted to protect, having the right policies and regulations within our organizations on how to handle breaches in data manipulation, ensuring that our privacy policies are up to date today and for the time to come. And the list of some of these challenges goes on, but what I would like to hear is initially from our esteemed panel, what are your views on such a topic, and what are you doing within your organization to adapt to this new norm around data privacy and data security? And I'd like to start with Andy, knowing that him and I have had lots of chats over the past couple of days. So I give you the floor, sir, virtually, and go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with this distinguished panel. I hope that next year we can meet in person, all of us, in Dubai once again. I think it's very important when you look at some of the things that are happening, and I'm reminded of the saying that you live in interesting times. I mean, times are kind of too interesting now. And when you talk about data privacy and the relationship between 5G-enabled technologies and things like the pandemic, and I, like some, are working from home now, the importance of understanding what the rules of the road are. And we talked in the previous panel, talked about collaboration, and collaboration within a nation, within a region, and in fact globally. I mean, globally there needs to be greater collaboration to strengthen the privacy rules of the road. We have the split between the European Union and the US with the European conclusion on Schrems II in terms of data and what will work for US companies. You have China working on a new data privacy law that's very much like GDPR. US does not have a uniform standard. We have the issue raised by the United States about apps, data related to apps. So the idea of us working together to come up with objective and transparent standards, best practices, and conformance requirements so that we know who is supposed to do what. We know that there's going to be some accountability. And we know, hopefully, that citizens and residents can know whether their information is going to be used only for the purpose that it's provided, or if it will be used for other purposes, and whether the data will be sent outside that country or outside the region. We need to step up and do a much better job of trying to address these issues.
Thank you, Andy. So collaboration is key. And I have a question to our friend from ITU. ITU being I would say the horizontal link between all of us that provides us the guidelines, the direction, and hopefully the insights on how best to collaborate. And what are those dimensions that we need to collaborate on? What are your views, and what is the ITU doing to address data privacy and security, especially as we see a major trend in the evolving of global smart cities? I mean, stats say that by 2030, we're going to be about a $4 billion USD market in terms of smart cities and digital services, which all fall back on data to provide that common good to all. I'd like to hear about the ITU's role in this, and then a follow-up with my colleague Ghazi, knowing that he's been in the realm of smart cities for some time and evolving as we move forward. Please, let's start with you.
Yes, thank you very much for having us today in the panel. The data privacy in the ITU from a standards perspective has been in the context of personal identifiable information and how to protect that information. There was a lot of standards published on PII, as well as securing the data in transit. So the encryption and the security of the data as it transits different networks. What we have seen recently is beyond the security of the data and beyond the PII, is that there is significant work happening on the digital transformation. You mentioned smart cities, and that's certainly one big area of work we've been doing with a number of partners, including the city of Dubai since 2015, that implemented our key performance indicators for smart sustainable cities. And that engagement with Dubai, as an example, was behind the city looking at the data governance laws in order to allow the various entities within the city to share the data in order to implement smart city solutions. And we see that same trend happen in many other cities as they start looking at key performance indicators and data metrics. They realize the need for a guidelines on how the data could be shared within the city or within the country. Smart cities is not the only track that we have. There is also activity on ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems. We see a lot of work on vehicles and the convergence of ICT of the automotive sector. Today in the ITU, we don't only have operators and vendors of equipment and solutions of telecom, but we have automotive industry partners like Volkswagen and Hyundai that are members of the ITU because of the convergence between the telecom sector and for the ICT sector and automotive. And in that intersection, there is significant amount of data in the vehicle, especially as we move into autonomous and assisted driving, and that brings challenges from a data privacy perspective. And perhaps the third example I will give in the digital transformation, and an area that we have been heavily involved in ITU, is the financial inclusion and the fintech in general. Data is like your credit data. It has that value. And the more people are using digital financial services, the more the lending institutions know about their behavior and their capability to pay back the loans. And we see that, and on that we published a report on big data, machine learning, and consumer protection and data privacy, which comes in the context of our work on financial inclusion, which is in partnership with the World Bank and support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we see that a huge shift in focus from the traditional telecom security of data in the ITU and the standards around personal identifiable information to now this intersection of the digital transformation, addressing smart cities, addressing the automotive sector, addressing the financial sector, and all of them have a common thread: the data, the big data aspects, the machine learning, the AI, and overall the data privacy for citizens around the world. And how can we get harmonized guidelines so that when you manufacture a car, for example, you can have it used across the world with very similar or equal data privacy laws. Maybe I'll stop there and look forward to further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those insights. And what I get from you as an advocate of transformation across the globe, be it in telecom or in smart cities, or even in transportation, you stand with the use of data for the greater good, and your role remains to be that of advocacy and regulation for the benefit of the greater good. Now, keeping that in mind, yes, please?
Yeah, well, ITU really offers the platform for the dialogue, because these are complex topics. Data privacy is also an issue of sovereignty. Each country wants to address it in a sovereign way in terms of its regulation and its laws. And what we offer in the ITU is the platform for the dialogue among technologists, among regulators, but especially in the digital transformation era, among people of different skills. The expert in the health sector, the expert in transportation, in the financial regulation sector, with the ICT base that the ITU traditionally has.
So the question goes to you, Ghazi, knowing you've been involved with ITU for many years, you were one of the pioneers in the transformation of Dubai, and now evolving to a more regional than global player in smart cities and the respective transformation, I should say. How are you addressing data privacy as you evolve new solutions today?
Yeah, thank you, Hani. Thank you. And it's a very interesting topic and a very difficult one, not an easy one. I think there's a lot of work being done on data privacy standards, GDPR and others. That is something that's in progress and will continue to be. And I think this is a very important topic to be addressed. And I believe that an outcome like GDPR, many others will be on their way. Where we are focusing on is not the actual GDPR-like policies, but more or less on the application of those policies within the delivery of a service. So effectively, how do you make sure that throughout the delivery of a service, you're actually, whether it's wanted or unwanted, you're sharing the right data or you're not sharing the data that shouldn't be shared. So what we call data inspection before data protection. So looking at every step of the way in an enterprise or a telecom operator or a city that's offering digital services, looking at what needs to be done in terms of data inspection. So making sure that every step of the way, from the beginning, as you start looking at your data model, to actually delivering digital services, how do you inspect the progress of data each step of the way, what data is being shared, what data is not being shared, versus the actual policy around data protection. So that has to be done, and that's something that we believe is critical and important as an organization, whether it's a government organization, a telecom operator, or what have you, is aiming to deliver digital services, that they must have an ongoing, consistent data inspection exercise ongoing with their actual delivery of digital services, so they can ensure that, in fact, they are applying and they are enforcing the protection that is based on these policies that are coming out from various entities.
So it's fair to say that any service that comes out of your shop in various industries, be it even healthcare or digital government services, that creating that data model that has a big part of data inspection as part of the methodology is something that gives further assurance to the end user, be it a B2B or B2C or even B2G, that their data is well taken care of,
Absolutely.
secure, and out of harm from any malicious activity.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, this is something we do with our customers. We have a large customer, it's a citywide customer that just asked us recently to come in and actually inspect their services and inspect the use of data and say, tell us where and how, if any, we are not compliant with the protection around data. So data inspection as a service is something that we're discussing with our customers, and it's quite important to make sure we actually follow the policies, yeah.
Well, that leads me to a different sector, the telecom sector. You're very heavy in digital, and I know there's lots of push, especially within the Republic of Egypt, around digital services and digital deployments. The new capital is up and rising, and from first-hand knowledge, we know they have a very challenging roadmap ahead of them to execute on various services. I know there's a big intelligent transportation system that's being deployed. What is your role as a incumbent in Egypt to address digital services, and how do you handle data privacy and security of those services?
Okay, thank you for the question. I wish we were the incumbent. We're not the incumbent. We're the latest.
That's our secret. See how it happens.
We're the latest entrant to the market, actually. So we've only been in Egypt for 13 years now. However, we've progressed very quickly, and we had tremendous success in the last years. So the first part of the question is how Egypt is using the digital transformation to bridge the gap. So Egypt had fallen back behind in terms of developing the infrastructure, in terms of reforming the government services, the public services, and all of that. And actually, the digital transformation is a huge opportunity for Egypt to bridge the gap and catch up with where it should have been by now. The problem with a country with 100 million people and the legacy of problems and decades of not having serious development and progress efforts is that it's very difficult to fix. You really need to start something completely new in parallel with trying to fix what's happening. So this is the idea of the new cities that are being built. It's not just the new capital. There are new cities being built, completely new cities being built all over Egypt. So you have a new capital next to not very far from the current capital. Then you have a new city on the north coast, Al Alamein. You have new Minya, new Mansoura, new Port Said. So it's like a shadow city being built next to each city. And the aim is to start moving the people from living on only 7% of the land to a larger percentage. In order to do that, you had to invest. You had to invest heavily in transportation and roads. And in 6 years, Egypt has built, I think, the equivalent of 40% of the network of roads that they had for the previous 5,000 years. So Egypt is really going in a very fast pace towards that. If we look at the role of telecom or the role a company like Etisalat is doing, so you have, we are the main contractor for the control system of the new administrative capital. So all the smart services of the new capital are we're building the control center for that. So other operators are also doing other projects in the new capital. But basically, all you mentioned, smart transportation, smart utilities, and all of that will be, the brain is supplied by Etisalat as a main contractor. The second part of the question is about data privacy and the increased demand on data privacy comes with the increased demand on digital services and digital transformation and all of that. But not only that, the Egyptian legislative system passed a law for digital data privacy and for cybersecurity. And we cannot say too little, too late. It's opposite to that. it's actually quite progressive, and it's very serious about the protection of your digital data, your digital privacy. Fines are very high. The demands required from the companies to invest in order to meet the requirements of the law are substantial. So we have a lot of challenges. I have to convince my CFO to invest in this, but we also need to do a lot of work in order to convince the people to change the way the culture. We're not a very privacy-oriented culture, so I don't want to be bad-mouthing my country, but I have a privacy screen on my phone, and my younger daughter was telling me that it's giving her a headache because she's trying to read it, and I'm saying you're not meant to read it. But as a culture, we have to be forced to follow the law, and so it's kind of like the seat belt or the speed limit. If you don't govern it, people are not going to follow it. So while the law might be harsh and challenging in terms of the investment and the processes and the policies that we have to follow in our company, I think it's a need, and I think that the need of the law to be strong, to be enforceable. We are seeing in Europe big companies, competition, I don't want to say their names, but they were fined in Italy yesterday, they were fined in Spain last week 3-4 times. And these are advanced communities that have been working with data privacy for a very long time, but they still fall for mistakes that they're being penalized for. So the challenge is big. I think in the coming period, we will see companies in Egypt being fined to set an example, and I don't want us to be one of them, but I think that it's something that's needed to shock the system and show people the seriousness of the issue.
You mentioned something very interesting around your daughter, and not specifically that she's trying to see your phone, because whether you have a privacy screen or not, she will definitely see what's on your phone one way or other. But it's a cultural perspective that has been embedded within the MENA region about what is data privacy. And is our data, my data, yours, easily used for the benefit of the greater good, and do they need my permission to use it for the greater good? In many countries, there are restrictions on how and when to use such data. Do you feel, and this is a follow-up on the culture aspect, that we're ready for more rigid data privacy regulations, especially in today's new norm, where applications and services are popping up, as we've heard from the previous panel, around quarantine compliance or tracking of COVID cases, so forth and so on.
We have a raised hand, I think. But sorry.
You're asking me, or
Both.
Yeah.
But
okay, are we ready? Probably not. Is it needed? Absolutely. I think it's you need. We did not have data privacy law, so when you have a data privacy law, in my opinion, it has to be strong and it has to be encompassing. And it's like quitting cold turkey. You have to do it, and you have to do it harsh with fines. Otherwise, people are not going to change the culture. So it's not going to be an easy ride, but I think it is needed.
okay. Who was from the panel? Raised his hand. Do you remember?
Which one is that?
David.
Virtually, anybody?
Sorry.
Yes, let me mention that I think it's very important that we think in terms of the principles and try to make sure that the technology processes and accountability meet the principles. So the idea, and I think this is certainly much more true, at least in Europe and from the various nations I visited in the Gulf, collect as little as necessary, transfer as little as necessary, keep as little as necessary, and keep it as briefly as necessary. But the momentum to make money So it was estimated by ENISA, the European Security Group, in 2017 that the average revenue per user was $59 US per person. So we need to make sure that folks are keeping an eye on these kinds of principles. And some of these technologies, such as scraping, these other companies that can come in and get the data that was provided for one purpose and basically take it and use it for another. And trying to strike a balance where, and you see it in terms of the battle basically between the US and Europe, that the US wants to be able to collect all the data for surveillance and then get a lawful purpose to choose to look at something. Where Europe says, no, you don't get to collect it unless you have a specific reason to collect it. And so some of these issues and these differences need to be worked out on a global and regional basis as well.
Marcel, any thoughts? I know you've been waiting anxiously to give us some of your insights. Data privacy, data security in the application space or elsewhere, how do you see it progress and what are some of the challenges as you see them?
Yeah, thank you, Hani. So I would like first to say that, as I heard, the problem is complex but not complicated. So what is data privacy in reality? So let's look deeper into that. You have two things to provide. First, as Andy said, there are data subject rights. The people providing their data have rights to be forgotten, right to be informed, right of mobility, right of change their data. They have rights. That's how I'm European, so that's how we deal with it in Europe. So we need to enable the rights for the users accessing the application and system. And secondly, there are obligations for data controllers and data providers. So data controllers are the first line of collecting the data. So it's an e-commerce website or an organization with its employees. And then the data processor are the second line, so you can delegate for cloud provider, for example, some of the business features, and they have to comply to the data privacy regulations. So data controller and data processors have obligations. They need to control who is accessing the data. They need, of course, to document why this data is collected, and they need to protect that data. So with the COVID, there is a very good news. One of the key challenges of those two main requirements is the identity of the users. A lot of hacks, a lot of breaches in data privacy was coming because somebody was accessing the data in the system, pulling out that data without knowing who is physically that somebody. Because of privileged accesses, because of DBA, because of administrators having accesses in system with just a login and password, which is an anonymous login and password. Today, with digitalization, with the COVID, we need to know who is accessing the data because we're going through the internet. We need to identify the user. So the boundary of the system is not the network anymore, it's the user himself. And even the administrator, the cloud operator, the business people maintaining a business application, they connect today through the cloud or through a VPN with their identity. And we trace everything they do. So that's a very good news to know who is doing what and better control segregation of duty and traceability of the access. The second good news is AI. I heard somebody said one of the challenges we have today in data privacy is to know where is the data. And in reality, this is a big challenge for organizations because data has been collected already. Data is in hundreds of systems already. And if you want to protect that data, we need to go and fetch it. Where is that data? It's not about looking at the column name of a table or looking at a file or an Excel sheet and looking at the column name. That's not enough. We need to, in an intelligent way, go and look for patterns of data looking like a phone number, looking like a credit card information, looking at social security, and then pinpoint that data, say this is a private data, I need to protect it. So today we have tools which can go and scan the data wherever it is and get out the PII information and then scramble it or pseudonymize it and then protect it accordingly. So I think we have two good news. Identity is more and more enabled because of the COVID situation, so we know more who is doing what. And secondly, with AI, we can leverage searching the data whenever it is in a more efficient way than before.
Thank you. That's very good. And I want to also add to that, and a question to follow to Bilal. The history and evolution of privacy frameworks and how they evolve sometimes are hand in hand or offset by economic growth. And some say we let go and ease up on data privacy for the benefit of the economies and to grow. Do you believe that potentially data privacy will become the sacrificial lamb for economic growth, especially in today's norm where we see many benefiting from easing of data regulations across the globe? What are your insights on that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah,
Very
sorry.
good question.
Yeah, so let me take that on very short.
No, Marcel, take it, and Bilal jump in. Go ahead.
Yes. So it's a very good question, and today I would say the maturity level we had a few years ago until now was low to say we need to know all the data in order to analyze that data and benefit from it and provide personalized, for example, services and so on. There was a lot of articles in France after GDPR. I'm based in France, by the way. There was a doctor, a very, very known doctor, who was saying this GDPR is killing innovation. Because if you start protecting the data, you cannot use that data to give innovative services to users and anticipate what they need. I would say this was maturity level 1. Today, we can do much more by pseudonymizing or anonymizing the data. We can identify a data subject. Let's say the anti-COVID application. I don't know if you heard about this anti-COVID application. We have an application today called anti-COVID in France. This application is the government is pushing everybody to use this application on his mobile phone. And this application can detect if you have met in the last 2 weeks somebody who has the virus. And it can give you an alert to all the people you met after that phone in the last 2 weeks. It gives them an alert, I met somebody who had the virus, you may have it. So there was a big debate on that one, but if we know who is who, there is a data privacy issue. So what the government did and what Apple and Google did today, there is a token which is completely disconnected from the physical person. And with that token, it's completely enough to send an alert to a person without knowing who is that person. You get an alert on your phone because you have the token, not because my name is Marcel Riscara. So I would say we have reached a maturity now in technology where we can leverage a lot of data without knowing who is the physical person behind it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, just to get back to your question about growth versus data privacy, it is a very delicate balance. If on one extreme you have total privacy, and the only way to reach that is by being disconnected from the network, from any mobile network, fixed network, or any of the digital economy that we're talking about today. The other is that your data is used without your consent, including very private information about your health, your financial situation, and so on. So the dialogues and the discussions that we've seen have been around finding that delicate balance between protecting the user to a certain extent while allowing access to the data with their consent so that applications and services could be provided to that user. And the example that Marcel just gave, if you can anonymize and shield the user from the application and service, like in the COVID tracking application around Europe. We have the same in Geneva. It's very much the same technology being used across Europe. Having those additional technologies that can shield you, like homomorphic encryption, for example, that could provide certain privacy protection in the network without really disclosing the information about the user. So the point is that finding that delicate balance between having access to the data with the consent of the user, with certain technologies that might shield the user, versus the other extreme of completely using the data of the individual without their consent. And in many countries, there are no guidelines today. So it's important to be careful not to swing too much on the side of over-regulating to the point of stifling that innovation and growth, and at the same time just not having the other extreme of no regulation whatsoever, and then the user has no protection, the consumer has no protection. So it is a really complex topic, as you mentioned, and the good news is that because of COVID-19, we're seeing more and more countries spend a lot of effort, a lot of energy on digitizing their applications and services to the citizens. For example, to send money during COVID-19, send social subsidies. And in order to do that, the individual must have a digital ID. And that's where, again, the technology now evolved so that the digital ID is biometric based and can provide a significant protection to accessing the data that the user would consent to. So maybe those are some points I wanted to share.
Thank you, Bilal.
Very interesting. I just want to give a small example. I mean, it's a silly example, but just illustrates the schizophrenia that we have when it comes to our data. So we, as a company, we basically posted a very simple digital service online to our employees, and we said we would like to complete the profile of all employees and on education and certification and training and so on. So please fill in and upload your certificates for any training that you've done or any project management certification, any kind of certification. As a company, we wanted to do that. So we were having an interesting discussion with employees who said, well, wait a minute, what are you going to do with this information? Well, we said, okay, we're creating a profile and we're going to share this profile with our customers. No, but this is my information. Are you going to share this? So I need to know before you do something with it whether you're going to use this information or not. And I said, hold on a minute. Aren't you using this information on LinkedIn right now? Isn't this all this information available on LinkedIn? And yes, it is. This is the schizophrenia that we have. If we're giving something to our company, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to use it? And then yet, the same information is freely available and uploaded on social media or LinkedIn style capability. So this is where, but the enterprise is still responsible, and the enterprise still must understand what is the information that is private to the employee or private to the customer, and how are you going to use this information? How are you going to inspect and protect this information? But it just gives you an idea. Bilal was just talking about that. What is the balance? And yet, a very simple example, things that are normally uploaded onto LinkedIn, but when it comes to in the internal enterprise, just a second, hold on, what are you going to use this
becomes a taboo
for? We had a really serious discussion among employees until we had to actually, kind of debunk this information. But it was a very interesting example.
Can I say something?
Sure, please go ahead. Khaled is...
Yeah. There is a very promising technology which is solving partially that problem. The question is today, when people allow to access personal information of other people, are they accessing that data for their initial purpose or for something else? So the question is not to be able to be allowed to access the data or not, because today we have a lot of people accessing the data because it's their job and they're allowed to. But breaches are coming from those people as well. How's that? Well, sometimes those people can use the data for a different purpose. So the only way to know that is to learn how did they use the data during the last year. And if suddenly there is a shift in their behavior detects that. So how do we do that? We do that with user behavior analytic tools. So there are tools today which go and plug into applications and look at how an HR manager uses employee data. How many times he changed the salary, how many times he creates new jobs, how many times he promotes somebody. And if suddenly this behavior changed, and if instead of doing that 10 times per month, is doing that 1,000 times per month, we can generate an alert. So this is a completely new area, and all the big cloud providers have this machine learning and deep dive, let's say, access control or access insight into the application to learn and generate alerts if there is a gap.
Interesting.
Okay, so this is the user behavior analytic work. And I think it's very, very promising technology.
Thank you. Khalid, you have a couple comments? I know we're running out of time.
Very quickly, but I like the way that Marcel approached this problem as a tech person. So we're trying to find a tech solution for a philosophical issue. Really, the issue here is a philosophical issue. As a user, I don't know that Booking.com from my IP knows where I'm opening the page and therefore gives me a different price. So if you want to book a hotel in Sharm el-Sheikh via Booking.com and you connect from Hamburg, you don't get the same price if you connect from Dubai, right? I don't know that as a customer, and that's why it doesn't bother me. But I know as a customer that, and this is something that harms me, I may be paying more money because Booking.com knows something about me. At the same time, I don't want the country to know where I am and who did I get in contact with COVID-19 wise, which is to protect my well-being because I feel it's an invasion of my privacy. And the difference here is that now I know. So it becomes a philosophical question. When do I know? If I know what happens, I uploaded willingly, but I'm not okay for you to share. But we're trying to find a technical solution. But I think the whole world will come to a different, evolved understanding of this issue as the time comes by. And I think the lockdown, the COVID-19, all the online presence that people are having now, digital identity because they need to shop and they're locked at home and all of that, I think this will accelerate. This is like a catalyst that will accelerate the process, and humanity will reach a consensus on that somehow shorter than we thought it would.
And I agree with you fully. It's more than a tech issue. It is very philosophical. I think the ITU friends there will have lots to do in the time to come, weeks, months, and years. I mean, as of recent, and this is as of today, Apple is back in court. Why? Because there's an NGO who filed a claim against them that they track user activity based on an IDFA, which is the identification for advertisers. So everything you do on your phone is being tracked by Apple and sold to the biggest bidder. Of course, Apple claims, and this is hot off the press of this morning, that they don't manipulate the IDFA on the phone, but this NGO, and the NGO is called NOI, which is none of your business. So, and they say it's an illegal tracking of people actions. Another case which was in the news a couple days ago that was pitched by Ilham Omar, which, as we all know, is a U.S. House representative out of Minnesota. She's claiming that the U.S. military-industrial complex is buying data on users that are using multiple applications, dating sites, adhan prayers, etc. Many of these applications, and understanding their geolocation. Where are they today when they download the application and use it? Of course, this is something that she tweeted, and I can't say it's fake news or real news, but it is something that potentially could be used and manipulated, that location data of folks is being used and assessed by different agencies. Hence, back to you, Mr. ITU. There is lots of challenges in the time to come around data privacy, data protection, and the greater good to deal with such pandemics. And hopefully this privacy, as I mentioned earlier, is not the sacrificial lamb. It is and will remain to be a core pillar as we find ways to manage it.
May I make 2 points?
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, interesting your comment about the tweet. I think we really have to be very careful, and I'm afraid that in the United States, although we're proud of our record of freedom of speech, we have to be very careful about blocking a tweet like the one you mentioned, because something like that may turn out to be true. Secondly, following up on something Marcel said, I think we need a greater emphasis when we talk about collaboration and innovation with transparency and the link between transparency and assurance. So he made the point, pardon me if I get it wrong, that at the end of the year you can check what the HR manager did with the information. The fact is, we in the United States have a third-party solution that monitors under the control of the telecom and mobile operator, monitors our access to customer networks and customer data. In fact, especially configured laptops are used, and every keystroke is logged. And the customer can see that. So in real time, the customer can see if somebody's doing something wrong. So my point is that I think the global community needs to do more on promoting assurance and transparency in communication, telecom and mobile operators, and Huawei and our competitors. And the idea of let's explore how we can use third parties, how we can use third-party technology. What kind of R&D can we use so that we could bring experts into our facilities, our manufacturing, to examine how well do we know what our people are doing? How well does the manager know? How well does the executive do? Are we really doing separation of duties? Coming up with technologies and processes and third-party capabilities so we can have a greater ability to know which products and services are worthy of trust. We have a greater ability to detect anomalous conduct and concerning activity so we can shut it down, so we can maintain the resilience of this ever-growing importance of the ICT networks and systems that we're going to be growingly, increasingly dependent on. So let's think about doing more about transparency so that we have a greater objective basis for knowing what we need to worry about.
Perfect, thank you. Bilal, any last words before we conclude?
Absolutely. I think just to rebound on the importance of finding those privacy-enhancing technologies that shield your identity as an individual from the data being exploited in ways that you have not consented to. And that's going to be a critical innovation area that we are seeing. Homomorphic encryption, for example, one of the solutions. Marcel mentioned one in the case of COVID-19 tracking. And we need to see more of that, because data is critical for any of the applications going forward. I'll just give a quick example of 5G machine learning. If you want to manage and operate a 5G network, we need to be able to have access to the data of the network, of course, in an anonymous and protected way. And I see even operators in Dubai, Du and Etisalat, are active operators in the ITU 5G machine challenge, machine learning challenge. We see that happening across the globe. So it's critical to find those privacy-enhancing technologies because the data is the fuel for the digital economy. We need to use it, but we need to use it in a responsible way.
Just a quick note, just to refer back to the discussion. I mean, we talked about earlier about data inspection services, and this is, you've got the policies in one place, and you've got the tools and technologies in another place, and you want to make sure, you want to inspect and check and validate at every touch point how data is being used, and is it compliant or is it not compliant, whether willingly or unwillingly, because in most cases it's unwillingly shared as far as information is concerned. But being able to inspect and validate the digital services domain, being able to inspect every touch point and validate whether this is compliant or not compliant against the privacy policy is going to be extremely important moving forward.
Marcel, any words before we conclude?
Yeah, I would summarize with, let's say, with 3 main points to enable data privacy today. The first one is identity and access management. So this is really key to know who is accessing the system and solve the problem of anonymous accesses or privileged access rights. The second point is user behavior analytics. We cannot, even if somebody has access to the data, we cannot prevent any data breach from there, because we need to know what people are really doing with the data. So analyzing the data with user behavior analytics tools can solve that problem. And third, as Razi said, one of the challenges will be, where is the data? I have legacy systems with data already replicated everywhere. So how do I control that data if I don't know where is the data? So looking at where the data is with tools which can go and scan it everywhere, including in cloud systems, is one of the key enabler for data privacy. Because if I don't know where is the data, I may have the best technology, I will not protect it. So those are the three key points where, as Oracle, of course, we have solutions, but all the software vendors have other solutions which solve the problem, well, mainly most of the problems of data privacy.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think we're out of time and over time as well, but it's been a very exciting and invigorating topic. I think we can continue chatting on this for at least another couple of hours, should we wish to. There is quite a balance between economic growth, data privacy, and the new technologies that we see that ensure that the data for the greater good is there and remains to be the case. I appreciate your time, all of you.
Very warm greetings from Geneva to Tony and the whole team in Dubai. We wish we could have been with you today, both Chesaf Lee and myself, but hopefully next year we'll be able to meet physically.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
And look forward to meeting you all in person.